customers are looking for while making use of logistics, or third-party logistics or four-party logistic providers. They're basically looking to transport goods, that's for sure, to orchestrate shipments and to have that visibility. And that visibility part is the difficult one. Now, if you look at the requirements, or at least the expectations of customers in Industry 4.0, we see that there is a definite gap between what these companies are able to do and what are their expectations on data compared to what today logistics companies are able to offer. We will not go too much in detail, but it's clear that the topics which are the main challenges in the supply chain are related to that operational efficiency, predictability and reliability. Safety is also a very important point, especially in the oil and gas and chemical business, of which we have a large cluster here in the port of Antwerp, but also in Houston and Singapore, which are the other ports where we are available today. There will be a huge focus on that sustainability in the coming years. I think COVID pushed it a little bit away, but and it will be good that we will see really logistics change which are sustainable and have a reduced climate impact. And of course, consumer demand. So today we are all used to have our goods delivered same day, the day after, and this just requires a completely different way of doing business, of sharing data as well, using APIs to have real-time available data. And related to these demands and challenges, there are definitely benefits for the customer, but for everybody involved in those complex supply chains. Direct cost savings, it's clear that once you have visibility on what the company before you in that supply chain has to do or has done, that you have good visibility on real-time planning, the transparency, the profitability, employee productivity, which is still the biggest cost in a logistics operation, and to have a speedy process. What's NxtPort doing in this? Just to give a small flavor, this is our mission, and in our mission as NxtPort is to bring and create that transparency in the supply chain by having all the different stakeholders in the logistics chain, especially in the maritime chain, by providing that transparency through a trusted platform. We will be able to increase revenues of our customers. They will be able to think about new ways of creating that revenue, not necessarily by sharing or by selling data, but especially by improving their processes. We are a platform to enable innovation beyond the own company. If we find a challenge somewhere in the supply chain, we bring the visibility on the table. We set the different companies who have direct benefits on improving the processes or bringing the efficiency and transparency in their supply chain. We come to innovative new concepts and use cases. Cost efficiency, if you look at a traditional 20-feet container to be shipped from Houston to the port of Antwerp, today in for a petrochemical company, bring it from Houston supplier up to Calais in a warehouse, you have 13 middlemen, you have 13 companies who are touching the freight in one way or another. So it means they have to be paid. So by bringing it all together, that brings transparency and visibility in the supply chain. Safety, not only for the goods, it's clear that you want to have and to transport your goods in a safe and compliant way. This also brings safety for the people who are involved in the supply chain. And think on the certified pickup process, which we have implemented now in the port of Antwerp. All stakeholders involved, there's full transparency on who is involved in the logistics chain to pick up a container in the port of Antwerp. And of course, if you have containers standing idle for 4 days on a terminal in a port, that's very inefficient. If you can use 1 or 2 days to deliver these cargoes to an inland terminal and still deliver the customer on time, it's clear that this will be more cost efficient and brings efficiency in the full process. How do we work? We have 3 layers created to guarantee the trust which parties need in that supply chain. A company, if we start below, private company or an authority or a third-party software company with just one single connection to our API enabling data backbone with a sharing logic, and we have created a system where we have digital vaults and digital handshakes, making sure that companies who have data to be provided will only share that data with the data user who is enabled to do so. Through the innovative part, we deliver applications and we co-create them with the different actors in the supply chain and publish them on the top layer on the marketplace. So I think this is important. It's especially on this blue layer, the marketplace, APIs and applications, but also on the green one, where we do use blockchain applications today. We are not building applications as NxtPort ourselves, but we have third-party applications which are using data from the NxtPort platform. So for instance, a private company sharing that data on the data backbone and can use that in blockchain applications which are available on the green layer and published in the blue layer through internet. So as such, the world is open, and we come to an hybrid format where trust, of course, in the technology is very important. Now, just with the technology platform, this would not be enough. It has to be an open platform by and for the community with a low entry barrier. And I think that is one of the challenges which we see in blockchain and blockchain solutions is the technical barrier to be overtaken by companies to have like an alien node inside, for instance, a computer farm where you have all these servers. This for some of these companies is just too high. Where we provide a data backbone with sharing logic and just always that same technical solution, which also has, of course, financially or good financial impact, let's say a lower cost. The data governance, and that's, of course, if we speak about trust, and you already said so in the introduction as well, trust and governance go together. If you have a secured and controlled access, but also if there's an audit trail, if you know exactly where data is being stored, if the processes are well run, this is something which gives a comfortable feeling to companies to share their data. Co-creation and those applications, and of course, even on the platform today, you can monetize apps and APIs as well as the data. So this is important. One connection, one interface, and one enterprise license to get that connection with the NxtPort platform. Gives the technological, comfortable feeling of sharing data, and it's easy to overcome. If I look at more specific blockchain, we still say technology is an enabler. Everybody is free to choose the technology he wants. We have taken the approach to keep the data backbone out of blockchain because we don't want to be linked to any other platform. And we see some definitely challenges in blockchain, and that's the integration part, and that's also why I believe we should put blockchain on an application level and really make use of data sharing logic combined with blockchain, because if you look just at it, it's still a challenge to have a blockchain in existing IT ecosystems. Data models is a second challenge, which I do believe, which we encounter regularly, as of course each company has a different data model, and you cannot today push in logistics one standard. There are many standards available, they're not used, and that is where exactly the focus should go towards in the coming years. But also the evolving technology. Blockchain, is it today mature enough to use as the only technology in logistics? I believe there is still a way to go. There are as well a few success factors today already to be detected, and that's of course the knowledge on blockchain is increasing, and there has been a lot of focus on that. We see that value and engagement of stakeholders is high. So that is definitely also a plus. And it's stimulating the culture of collaboration, which is very much needed in this silo world of logistics. So for me, looking at blockchain, I think great way to start with that standardization. On an application level, definitely a yes. Visibility, yes, through blockchain, but also through audit trails, which are available. It's connecting all the players, so that's supporting the model which NxtPort has put in place, and it's facilitating new business models. So I would say definitely a big yes to blockchain, as the need to collaborate exists and will only be stimulated by doing so. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Geert. So I see a difference between central broker of a data brokerage role and the more open, collaborative way of blockchain, which is a ledger initiative. Do you see other disadvantages related to a central versus a decentral or central organized structure? How difficult will it be to get blockchain initiatives to get off the ground, for example? Do you have an opinion on that, Geert?
I think what we see happening today in logistics is that communities are being formed by either shipping lines and terminal operators at one side who have big infrastructure, a relatively low number of big players. So I believe blockchain could be the way forward to create that visibility and transparency. If you look at the land side of logistics, warehouse operators, the many thousands of trucking companies, which are many smaller companies, independent truck drivers, I do not believe that they will be the ones who are going to drive blockchain in supply chain. We do see initiatives as well from large 3PL players and like DHL and others who are promoting blockchain. So as usual in this world of logistics, there will be some parts where it will collide, where it will be difficult to get both worlds connected to each other, and that's where exactly we see NxtPort could play a role into that as a neutral data backbone who could feed basically the different applications of the different players. And so it really depends, I think, looking at the complexity also, it is complex to have to participate to this type of projects. I think today it's still in hands of the big 3PLers and shipping lines and terminal operators who really do see that benefit and who can share the transparency between each other. But I mentioned, for instance, certified pickup in the port of Antwerp, where people have the choice to use a blockchain application or to use through user interface direct application going onto the NxtPort platform. So both are possible, both are secure. It's just a different approach.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to our second speaker, Michiel, the co-founder of Dockflow. And I'm curious to hear his vision, because he's right in the track and trace applications. Dockflow has a lot of insights from when and how users and what logistical use cases are there that might be more relevant to be used or combined with blockchain or not. Michiel, you also could make the small tip over to physical internet. So I'm curious to what you can share with this audience.
That's correct, Frederik. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I will summarize the last 3-4 years that I've experienced in blockchain and logistics. I think everybody can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, loud and clear.
So I will try to summarize the last 3-4 years that I've been active in blockchain and logistics, the industry together. Who am I? I'm indeed co-founder and tech lead at Dockflow. Tech lead, which means that day to day, I'm coming from a more technical background. I'm more comfortable in my code editor as I am in PowerPoint, but I will try to give the business perspective on this as well. How did I roll into logistics? That was actually during the last year as my study of commercial engineering, where I had some experiences during an internship with logistics. And coming from a technical background, I see that there were still some possibilities. I was actually really surprised by how much things were still done on paper. And even back then, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, even back then, blockchain was already 10 years old. So there was already a lot of promises about what blockchain could do. It would revolutionize everything. But still, it was already existing for 10 years and it was not used. So that's why I did my thesis on blockchain in maritime logistics, and specifically looking at the e-bill of lading application. And I've taken a couple of screenshots from the research from 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the main limitations then was about technicalities. One of them was security. Is blockchain secure enough? Because indeed, some argue that electronic transmission of data is not secure enough for a bill of lading, which is, of course, a very important document, but also other kinds of data. This could be said. And actually, conclusion already back then was that it's not safe for quantum computing. That's something that certainly can be said. But if we have to not use any application that is not safe for quantum computing, then we have to throw away every cryptographically secured application that we're using today. So it is not really a threat, not back then, not today. I think blockchain could be considered one of the most secure systems on a technical basis. Another technical limitation was the scalability. And back then it was very popular to say that there could be only 10 transactions per second. And it was true back then. But since then, the technology has advanced a lot. And even then, there were some initiatives already to improve the scalability, because then the standard comparison was made, how many transactions can a blockchain technology make versus Visa or MasterCard technology, for example. But we see that now, and I think also the speakers after me will confirm that there are blockchain systems that can go to thousands of transactions per second. So this is not a limitation today anymore. Same for storage. If a blockchain will require that each node stores all data of everyone on their systems, and then we go to 100 terabytes, 2,600 gigabytes of data that everybody will need to store, which was a limitation back then, or a thought that would prevent blockchain from being adopted. But also here we've seen technology advancing, and we've seen solutions to this problem. And I've taken a picture here from another white paper on blockchain, where it was specifically about the technical limitation of change working together. So you have data on one blockchain and you would need it in another competitor blockchain. How would that work? And I think very little people would get this diagram here, including me. I have no clue what it is about. But it's already clear that there are technical solutions to those technical problems. And also during the last 3-4 years, I've seen that there can not be any technical limitation to implementing a blockchain. If there is ever a question about, can a blockchain do this? Is it secure? From a technical perspective, the answer will always be positive and good for the blockchain case. But I've done this research, and after that, we had a very interesting project with the Flemish Institute of Logistics, Valee, where they actually said, let's do this. We have the theory, but let's actually apply this in practice. We had a couple of companies mentioned here who had the same question, like there is a lot of buzz about it, a lot of promises. Let's just do it, very pragmatic, and see what can we solve. And they had a question, they had some use cases about sharing documents through a blockchain, track and trace, traceability, certificates, digital certificates, and so on. And what we actually did there is just set up a blockchain as it was subscribed, as it was set to do so by theory. And we set up a Hyperledger blockchain then, and 3 nodes in there. And actually, if you would look into the technicalities, it's more, this would all be considered a textbook implementation of how a blockchain should run. I will not zoom in onto the specific stack here, but we had that blockchain network. And then we started putting data on there. But the nice thing about the project was that we had the use cases with a couple of different participants who worked together on the same routes, the same cargo flows. It went to BCTN inland, and then a truck drove through, and so on. And we needed traceability and documenting about that. So we had that blockchain in the middle. And then a choice came, what do we do with it? How do we set this up? And one of the choices was to put all these messages that we got, these digital messages, truck has arrived, barge has arrived, vessel arrived, departed, and so on, to put it on that blockchain, which would be just a messaging bus. It's like receiving an inbox, having an inbox, an email inbox with all those messages coming in. One limitation we saw there is that it's that such a setup has a very limited potential for automation. Because if we want to use smart contracts, automizing things, we would need a shared understanding of this data, which was a next step. And I will quickly give an example of that. We have, for example, here on the left, a message that we get from DP World, where we see that there is a gate in at the terminal DP World for a certain container, which is, in essence, a very clear message. The container has arrived there, it's gated in, it's standing on the quay. But looking at the data usage of this, it could mean a lot of different things. If we get this message, we know that the location of the container can be updated. We know that at this timestamp, it was at that location. We also know that the road transport has ended because the truck can return and the road transport has ended. The sea transport, on the other hand, has started. And if we want to automate things, we should also get a shared understanding of what does this data mean and what should it trigger? And is it plausible enough? Can anybody just send this message? What if the date is different or there is an error in the equipment identifier? Those are all things we need to standardize. And I think this is a very clear case where if we talk about standardization in blockchain, that there is a real need to do so. Then looking at the use cases we've seen at Dockflow, we come from this blockchain sphere. So we've had a lot of questions in the projects that we do about, can we use blockchain? Or, oh, I see you're using blockchain, so you most likely will be able to solve this problem. One of them was the changed ETAs. ETAs changed a lot, and we want the carriers to be held accountable if the ETA changed. Blockchain was also part of the proposal or how we looked at this problem. But in the end, we decided not to use blockchain in this use case because it didn't add any value there. The main problem in good ETAs, alerts, and keeping track of them is getting the data is one, but also not generating too many or too less alerts is one of them. And blockchain did not really provide a solution for us there or not any added value. Another one that we got asked for was carrier on-time performance. If container is arriving late, we want to keep the carrier accountable. We want to send messages. We want to inform everyone. We want to kickstart some automatic processes. So we need a blockchain to do this. Was also the initial setup of this. But also in the end here, we decided not to use blockchain because same reasoning, getting the data, getting it communicated was a challenge, but not putting it on a blockchain. Last use case was temperature, where we also started from blockchain. But also here, challenge was in getting the data, good sensors, operational practices, deciding what is a temperature alert, because is this container in or out temperature can be a discussion. But blockchain did not provide any additional value in this use case. And if I look at some other use cases, and I think the speed portal can be a very good source for that. It is very interesting use cases, very specific problems in a specific context. And my general experience with this is that blockchain will not add any value in specific use cases, in specific contexts for a specific client. So for these single use cases, I've seen that blockchain tends to add just technical complexity. It can be a part of the solution, but it should be a decision by the IT provider. If you have to use an integration, there's a couple of options, the FTP, AS2. Blockchain could be one of them, but it should not be a business decision. The main value of these single use cases is in the overall application functionality and experience. And one other experience that I've seen there is don't become a bpost telnet yourself. If you look at blockchain as being a way of transferring data, the way that Telenet and bpost does for postal, why should you set up your own nodes and infrastructure? This should not be necessary just to use a blockchain. So for these single use cases, I've seen that it's not adding a lot of value and it's more of a cost. But I do see a great future for blockchain in logistics, but then more on the longer term and more on the evolutionary term, where physical internet will be introduced. And I think the term will be known for most of you, where cargo finds its own way through a network, that cargo is not handled manually, and most of the things are done automatically. Also, synchro-modality would be a concept that would be introduced here, where cargo finds its own way on the spot. What is now the best route to take? Should I go by train, by barge, by truck, depending on the circumstances at that very moment? And also AI, which is not a new technology, but we still have to harvest a lot of the value there. And I see that if we really want to go to that future, which sounds a little bit sci-fi now, then we will need all of these data coming together seamlessly. And that's what I call master data management. It goes beyond a single use case. It's not this specific problem for this specific client, but it's more as an industry that we need to work together to enable these innovations, which will not be there tomorrow, but I think they will be there in 10, 15 years. And for that, blockchain will be one piece of the puzzle that fits in. Because what we see now on the left would be like the Amazon style. Everything is in one company and it's very much integrated. It's one platform within a company. But blockchain could enable that even a lot of smaller companies could work together and deliver the same seamless experience where all the data comes together. And that's how I've seen blockchain in logistics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michiel. So I see that you're still quite skeptical about lots of use cases that are that you really need to consider well if blockchain adds value. So what pops up in your presentation, or what I find intriguing, is that when it's about a smart contract, more a contract than just about messaging, then it starts getting to create some value and it evolves into a higher probability that blockchain is a good solution. Is that interpretation correct? Or can you help me in that?
Yeah, smart contracts is a very sometimes misused terms, and it was also from the Valee project that we got the saying that a smart contract is neither smart nor a contract. It's everything you can say it to be, actually. A smart contract is just code executing on the data that was given. So in that sense, I stick to the conclusion that for single use cases, it will be of very little value to use a smart contract for that.
Okay, thank you, Michiel. Now we have Philippe, co-founder of Legit, and Philippe will tell us how a public data ledger benefits the supply chain and logistical industry. And he will introduce us also more about the origin of blockchain and bring us an intriguing case study of fresh product provenance and how blockchain can add value in this application. So Philippe, please share that precursor application. I'm listening here.
Do you hear me?
I hear you loud and clearly.
And do you see my screen?
Also.
Perfect. Thank you, Frederick. So yeah, I'm here to make a strong case for why a public data ledger or a public blockchain could greatly benefit the supply chain and logistics industry. So first, maybe a short introduction who I am. So I'm Philippe Marien. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Legit. At Legit, yeah, we are a software consultancy company, and we have a very strong focus on blockchain technology. Over the years, we have implemented a lot of projects with both private and public blockchain technology. So I think we have a pretty good overview of all the possibilities of the technology. I am also the CEO and co-founder of Geert. At Geert, we offer a very easy to implement blockchain integration through our API and SDKs. On top of that, I'm also the product owner at Unisot, and Unisot is an enterprise supply chain management platform, and they use blockchain as their data layer. I will tell you more about that a little bit later, but first I want to talk about where public blockchain technology stands today. What we see is the future of public blockchain technology, and then I'll touch shortly on some current real-world use cases. To understand blockchain technology, I think I need to start with a little bit of history on blockchain, because blockchain technology is actually really old technology. It exists since 1991, but back then it was just a distributed data ledger. And in itself, it's not that special because it didn't really create a lot of fuss. The real fuss came when Bitcoin came into this world. It was invented in 2008, and that's where the real interest started. So why is Bitcoin this real innovation, and why is there a lot of interest in these cryptocurrencies? Well, Bitcoin sees security as an economic function, and that's really interesting because Bitcoin as a network, it is really expensive to attack the network, and it's very cheap to defend the network. So you need to spend a lot of money to attack the network, but you can earn money if you defend the network. So it rewards honest people and honest parties. So one of the reasons why we choose public blockchains is because there's a lot of misinterpretation that public blockchains are money. It's not that. The real innovation lies in adding economic value to data. Because Bitcoin came about in 2008, and when it was released, it wasn't really completely ready for a public release. So that's why other cryptocurrencies came about. Think about Ethereum, Ripple, and all those. There's a few thousands of them right now. So smart contracts, that's one of the original reasons why there were other cryptocurrencies, but actually it was always possible in Bitcoin, but since it was kind of a beta release and not back in 2008. So a big problem in this cryptocurrency space is speculation and misinformation. As you all know, everybody has that friend who invests in some cryptocurrencies and says which coin to buy, which coin to sell. Everybody wants to make a quick buck, become an overnight millionaire, but that creates a big problem in this space because there's a lot of misinformation since everyone is just selling the coin that they just bought because they want to earn money. All of this speculation creates misinformation, and that's what holding back businesses to adopt this amazing new technology, in our opinion. So where are we right now with public blockchain technology? Well, I'm here to tell you that today it is scalable. Today we handle 20,000 transactions per second on Bitcoin. It is stable. It is built on a very stable protocol. It is secure, as I mentioned before, because Bitcoin has security as an economic function, and it has a transaction cost of a fraction of a cent. I probably have confused a lot of people here because they think, oh, Bitcoin, it can only handle 7 transactions per second. I have a table here where you can have a small overview of where some of the current blockchain technology, the public blockchain technology, stands today in comparison with Visa and MasterCards. But we do not, because at the top there's Bitcoin BTC and at the bottom there's Bitcoin BSV. A very important note here is that we view Bitcoin as a protocol. It is not money. So Bitcoin BSV implements the original Bitcoin protocol, as it was invented back in 2008, and as you can also read in the white paper. So as you can see here on Bitcoin BSV, we do 20,000 transactions per second today. The average fee is a fraction of a cent. You can have smart contracts on the blockchain. It's a public blockchain, and storage happens on chain. Then we go to the future of blockchain technology. Here you can see a small comparison of some of the transaction throughputs in both blockchains. Most of them are public, but you can also see PayPal here. You can see IBM's Hyperledger, which handles 2,700 transactions per second. At the moment with Bitcoin SV, we are almost at the level of Visa. At the end of this year, we foresee 50,000 transactions per second, but on top of that, on the testnet today, we see 100,000 transactions per second. And this is super important because where are we going? We need unlimited scaling for business adoption. Business needs a huge transaction throughput, frictionless, it's super important. So that's what we foresee in the future. What we also think is going to happen is a consolidation of chains. Right now, businesses are experimenting with blockchain. You have, for example, IBM's Food Trusts, but there's 1,000 of those examples. But we think that the true value lies in all the data in one place. So we think that in the future, it will not happen in a few years, but in a decade or so, we think that everything will consolidate in one chain because that's just the most efficient way. Something that's also really interesting is NFTs, so non-fungible tokens. I think probably a lot of you have already heard of them, but more in a marketing context, because NFTs right now, you see that some artwork gets sold for a few $1 million, or the first tweet of Jack Dorsey was also an interesting one, and that was sold for a few $100,000, but that's not what real NFTs are. The true value of NFTs lies in the commoditization of data. So data as a commodity. What if you can tokenize small fractions of data? I'll give you an example in the logistics sphere. So let's say you have a container, and in that container, there's an IoT temperature sensor. What if you can buy or sell just one temperature reading? So on top of that, you also have the other benefits of blockchain, such as the traceability. And very important note here to make as well, because that's also where a lot of confusion comes about, is the privacy of this data. People think because it's on a public blockchain, everyone can see it. Well, that's not the case. Privacy is very important here. And if you want to share, buy or sell a piece of data, that data is only accessible and visible for the parties that are involved. So this is a very short update on current state of blockchain technology and the future of blockchain technology. There's probably a lot of questions about this, but you can always contact me or one of my team members to go more in depth about that. But I think we would be here for a few hours then. But let's talk about some real world use cases, because yes, it is being used in the real world today. I'll start with Unisat. I'm the product owner at Unisat, and at Unisat, what it does, it is, I'll first start with how the technology, or how it happens today. So today, everybody has their own, every company has their own ERP system. And if you want to connect to other ERP systems, interfaces need to be built. That's how it is right now. What Unisat wants to innovate is it puts all the data on the blockchain. So instead of a web of interfaces, it is replaced by an access control layer where you can give people access to certain parts of the data. So the goal of Unisat here is to remove the data silos. So instead of data silos with interfaces, we create one universal source of truth of data, and people just get access to that data. In practice, this can create a lot of possibilities, such as product provenance, traceability, but also lifecycle assessment and track and trace. I'll give you a real world example of, there's fresh halibut here on the screen, but I'll use Norwegian salmon since it's a little bit more well-known. By the way, Unisat is a Norwegian company, so that's why there's a connection with the Norwegian salmon. So for Norwegian salmon today, they use, certain producers use Unisots to create traceability and to have both end consumer transparency. So the end consumer in the sushi restaurant in Oslo can check when the salmon was born, where it was produced, where it was cut into fillets, and which company transported it. So we can follow the salmon through its life cycle and see if it is really an original Norwegian salmon. But it also creates efficient intercompany information exchange, because all the companies that are involved in the life cycle of this salmon, they have the same data. So they have access to the same data. They add their data points to the same data. So it's all in one place. That's Unisots. And one more thing, maybe life cycle assessment is super important here as well, because for example, for fish, it's very important to get the ecological labels such as MSC. And with Unisots, you can have all your data in one place. So if you want to obtain this certificate, you can just give them the data and you have your life cycle assessment as well. So that's one real world use case today. Another real world use case is with Geert. Shortly, what is Geert? Geert is basically the most frictionless way for any company today to implement blockchain. We have an API where you can read and write anything to the chain. We have SDKs, which makes it very easy for your developers to work with Geert. Geert is also a data platform where you can do analytics and explore all the data that you have put on the blockchain. There is no third-party storage needed. Very important also, we don't have a token. You just pay in your local currency, so you don't have an impact on the price of this token of the public blockchain that we use. A real-world use case with Geert today is a super interesting one because it touches on all the bases that I covered previously. We have with Geert an online accountancy platform. What does this online accountancy platform do? What makes it interesting for customers? It does automated invoice recognition. So an accountant needs to, has less work because he doesn't have to book every invoice himself, because invoices get automatically recognized and get put in the right place. Sometimes though, data of these invoices get lost because invoices get printed or re-uploaded. And by having a digital blockchain representation of the invoice, the software has all the metadata that it needs to automatically process the invoice. So it heightens the invoice authenticity because it always refers to the same invoice. And it lowers the work for accountants again because there are more invoices that will be automatically recognized by their system. But then I'll touch bases on the NFT. This is a real-world use case of what an NFT should be. What if you can earn money if you share your invoices? So every invoice is a token. You can sell the information in that invoice. So let's say you have this one online accountancy platform, but there's another online accountancy platform, and they also do automated invoice recognition. What if they pay a cent or a fraction of a cent to access that information? And then, so the cost that our client has with us, they can make money because they will sell the data to other companies. I have shortly summarized where we are today and how public blockchains are being used in the real world. I know that there's probably a lot of questions about this because there's a lot of misinformation, but trust me when I say that this is really happening, and this is what we see is the future of data. So that's a short overview of how we at Legit and Geert view public blockchains. Thank you.
Great, Philippe. What an interesting presentation. I have indeed lots of questions to you, but we agreed we have we will have one now, and maybe there's some time at the end of the webinar. Huh? So my question is what is driving the evolution of consolidation? You mentioned we are going to consolidate into one chain. What is driving that? Why will it happen?
Simply because of efficiency and economy. It is just more cheaper to have your data in one place. It's more efficient to have the data in one place. And players will see if innovative companies will adopt this technology, because that's what we think will happen. So more innovative companies will start adopting public blockchain technology, and will see that it is efficient and that they can make money on their data. Yeah. So data is the new gold. Blockchain enables this.
Indeed. And your example of Geert is indeed a great example of data commoditization. Huh?
Yes.
What a great invention, Philip. Bringing us to Pedro's application. Pedro is innovative project manager at Load, part of the Valee group, and also lecturer at the university in Portugal. We already discussed football, so guys, in the Q&A, no football questions. But Pedro will tell us the ins and the outs of smart logistic blockchain architecture. Like every system, it needs to have a well thought through architectural representation. And he will also share us an example or a use case of a global pharmaceutical logistical company. It's clear that in these ages of vaccines, pharmaceutical companies struggle with logistics. And of course, the cold chain plays an important role in this. If you want to export to, if I'm right, Pedro, 220 countries, a vaccine and drugs, crazy. Pedro, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for not making jokes about Belgium and Portuguese relationship for now. Yes, indeed. Can you all see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, indeed.
I assume so. So yes, I am here to present what we at Load have implemented, or we are implementing in a big transportation company in Portugal, and the way that we are implementing it, and also how we achieve this knowledge in blockchain. So first, just presenting Load, we are a company dedicated to the study and development of new digital products. We try always to be very democratic in what respects to technology. So we don't follow just one path in terms of technology. We just try to find the best suitable technology for each one of our clients. We are also part of the Valee Master Innovation Group. We kind of consider ourselves as part of the digital arm of Valee. And where did all this start? We start back in the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, when we decided internally, in strategic terms, to acquire and to settle our development team with enough knowledge of emerging technologies. So then and now, the emergent technologies, or some of the emergent technologies, were blockchain and artificial intelligence. So we designed this concept of implementing a blockchain that would be applicable to this scenario of a supply chain of a big retail company, that would allow that someone someone would show up into a shelf in a supermarket, could pick up a product there. Our main scenario was a steak, a beef from a cow, So this person could pick up that piece of stake and ask questions to a conversational bot about the origin and all the characteristics of that stake, since a farm that where the cow was raised until the slaughter, until all the transportation, the conservation conditions on the transportation, until it got to that shelf in the supermarket. So all the way since the producer, the distribution, all the warehouses were that were kind of checkpoints on that path. All the actors in this process until it got to the store and to the shelf would be stored in a blockchain, and this would be stored in an automatic way without human intervention, with sensors, the most of possible with sensors, so we could have really reliable information shown to the user. So we implemented this system, this blockchain, and at the end, so we used the blockchain. We acquired all the knowledge of blockchain. We benchmarked. We made a state-of-the-art study. We made a lot of implementations. What could be the best solution? And we decided to go for the EOS IO protocol and to implement our own blockchain to make all these experiments. After this, we implemented the artificial intelligence part, all the voice recognition, all the conversational part that would allow to have the final result. So this chatbot would greet the user, would recognize his mood, it would recognize his gender, so it can better adapt the speech to the user, and then would ask questions and to the user to obtain what were his doubts. And the user could make some questions about the product. And those questions were processed inside, transformed into queries to the blockchain that would allow to give all these answers. So this is the final result, and one of the screens with a map with all the path from the product since the origin until the store, that could give in a certain point what was the temperature in a certain day in a certain location, and the humidity conditions of conservation, when it was there, how it was there, and how much time it took to since that point until today, until it gets to the store. So this was our experience, where we got all the knowledge necessary to be able to talk about it, to propose solutions, and to go further with that. So we used all of this to catch this opportunity of reaching Rangel. Rangel, it's one of the biggest transportation companies in Portugal that is present in 220 countries, and they were 1 year ago wanting to leverage their special unit that they have of transport, pharma, and medicines from warehousings until the pharmacies and hospitals. So they wanted to leverage this unit, and for that they wanted to give this sign to the market that they were embracing digital innovation and transformation. So they wanted to combine, and we helped them with that process, to combine a design approach, that user-centric design approach, but also to be integrated as much as possible into what is their current operations already established. So our approach, we started applying what we call the digital product research. So this is something that we explore with our client, all the information on the subject and on the problem, and we help him to bring that problem into reality and to point out some solutions for it. We identified the target group needs, the main features that we have to take into account, their business goals, and we cook all of that. We discuss with them and then perform a technical benchmarking and all the risk assessment around that. What was the process that we reach that would be suitable for them? So they had those locations, so those warehouses, the medicines and the COVID vaccines would arrive to this warehouse. All these warehouses had already conservation restrictions and sensors sending data. So all these sensors started by registering in the blockchain which products they were and also their conservation information. When these tracked items, and when I mean tracked items, this can mean depending on the medicines. This can mean just a box of medicines, a box with several medicines, an order. So there are several kinds of items that can be tracked in this system or that they want to track. And when the transport initiates, we will store the blockchain, the user ID. That means that is, for example, the driver of the truck that starts the transportation. The list of medicines that are being transported, all the documentation that is associated to it. And this is already an information that the end user can consult. And the end user in this project are two kinds of end users that are the healthcare professionals that order the items and they are expecting them at the pharmacies, but also anyone that is interested to have that information. So a common person that buys that medicine can, if that person wants, to consult all the information associated with the transportation on the medicine. Not only the transportation, also some medicine, some medical information on the medicine, but that has nothing to do with the blockchain, but it is also possible to be retrieved from the sources that are already available. So along the transportation, all the sensors also send regularly updates of data, the temperature, the humidity, the location. And all of that is information that is being updated in the blockchain and in a kind of almost live context. The end user can see all of that information. When it gets to intermediary checkpoints, into the intermediary warehouses, the items are again identified to be stored there. This part of the transportation terminates, and other updates can be seen in the interface that we are developing for it. When the medicines are in a warehouse steady, they are also under conservation conditions, and more data is being updated and more data is being able to be consulted until they again are transported to the final destination. And when they get that final destination, all that information is also available in which order the medicines are related to, in what conditions, if in any part of the way, any of the range of temperature or humidity was different than the usual or in a dangerous situation. So all of that is able to be consulted, and with the guarantee that no one has changed it to make any harm with it. So all the information is automatically sent and stored into the blockchain. So during this part, during this assessment that we were making with Rangel to define the architecture, the following main features that would be implemented were discussed. So the main one of the first feature, it was the traceability. This is obvious in a logistics context. So at any point, the blockchain should have enough information to answer what the product is, where it is, in which conditions it is being kept, why is it in that specific situation, who is the current responsible for it, and all the history associated to that. Another discussion about the granularity of the information, what I mentioned about if we are storing information about each medicine box, about a container, for example, the COVID vaccines, they are all in a kind of a box. In terms of transportation, that is not a big deal, transporting the COVID vaccines, because hundreds of vaccines can fit in one small box. The only thing that they need to ensure is that that box is within a fridge, within that temperature and certain conditions. So this granularity was discussed, in which different containers could be, what were we dealing with different containers. Also the simplicity that we would supply. So a lot of information can be stored, but that doesn't mean that it is interesting to show to each user all that information. So the healthcare professional, when it consults the app, needs to see some kind of information, but an end user that buys a medicine is interested to see other kind of information and doesn't need to see more complex information. So blockchain is obviously the main goal, to be transparent, but this doesn't mean that all information needs to be understandable by everyone. Another feature that was discussed to be taken into account was to be able to score or to calculate a score for each tracked item. So during the whole supply chain process, we can have more or less information about a tracked item that can contribute to the reliability of the information and have it a score associated to that. And of course, the last feature, the immutability. So this was the big message that they wanted to send to the market, was that, and that's one of the reasons that we, as we will see now, we used a public blockchain, was to grant that all the information that was there was not controlled by Rangel or by any lab or by anyone else. So all the information sent by the chain would be real credible and immutable. So after this, we started selecting which blockchain to use. As I said before, it was already decided that we should use a public blockchain by the reasons that I have already mentioned. So 4 parameters were had into account to decide which blockchain to use: the cost of using it, the speed, the how much decentralized that blockchain could be considered, and the smart contract availability, because it was essential to keep all of this information and to react properly to each transaction. We had this comparison about Ethereum, EOS.io, and IOTA. So the final results were quite obvious. So we had in one side an Ethereum not yet which demanded more speed to process all the transactions. We had an iOS IO protocol with using an algorithm of delegated proof of stakes that would allow to reduce significantly the speed of the transactions. And we had IOTA, whose big problem was not having available smart contracts. So putting all this in the balancing all of this information, we had an Ethereum with more speed, expensive because each transaction should pay a fee. Although it was the blockchain that would grant more decentralization, but for example, the smart contracts were more difficult to be updated. So to have a change in a smart contract, the process is more difficult. And we had the iOS IO, the EOS IO with a less cost because it has no fees, although the owner of the account, Rangel, would have a certain stake defined there to grant all the transactions involved, but with more speed, with smart contracts that were more easy to be updated, but with the cost of having less decentralization, because with the delegated proof of stake will demand that to have kind of a less democratic access to the confirmation of the algorithms involved. IOTA was already not considered because it had no smart contracts. So the choice was the EOS IO. All of this met the fact that we could use a technical approach similar to the experience that we had based on this blockchain. So we had all the paths between the warehouses, the distribution path, and the users, using sensors and automatic data input with which we could trust and about its immutability. Although we had to be compliant also with the existing infrastructure of Rangel that was already processing data in a traditional way, but some of that data needs to still remain as it was and enter in the system, which we are considering as untrusted and mutable data input. So this is stored also in the blockchain, but not as trusted as the one that has no human intervention. And all of this data can be consulted using centralized apps that wants to consult final users and also healthcare professionals. So this is the solution that we are implementing at Rangel. This is still ongoing, but it's a project that is going very well with a lot of expectation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Was there a specific reason or priority in the evaluation by your customer? I saw scorability, immutability were very important, but which one was the most important to them?
With this client, their knowledge about blockchain, they were very curious, but we were also kind of pedagogical with them. We we teach them some notions about it, and we discuss them a lot and try to help them to see what could be their priorities, and trying to help them and to support them with that. So but mainly what they wanted was to leverage their health unit and to give a sign to the market that they're using some emergent technologies, and that they wanted to grant all the transparency to the information that they wanted to place.
Yeah, of course, that's also a good reason to move into blockchain. Not yet because there are in particular benefits, but just to be ahead of the trend and start early, and learn with it. Okay, but that's a very good insight, because if I look to Michiel, in your opinion, of your presentation, you showed some examples and use cases where the benefits were just not high enough. How do you see that? So if the benefits are not high enough, why would you still decide to move then in doing it, just to be ahead of the trend? Michiel?
Yes, correct. And that's indeed what we see bigger players do. Logistics, Maersk, with their TradeLens platform, and also I think almost every major carrier has joined now. Because indeed for logistics and then bigger companies, it's beneficial to have this knowledge about blockchain and what kind of types of blockchain and all these things, to have it inside of your company. So for smaller companies, I would not recommend solving a specific problem with blockchain, but for bigger problems, as bigger companies, as they become more digitized, they will need this kind of knowledge in-house, and that's why for them it makes sense to more experiment with this technology.
Yeah, probably the reason is that because they judge it will be a critical software tool in their future, and there is no option. They need to go for it, and they want to be first, or with the first few.
Yes, they will need it. As these bigger companies, they become more digital, they will need also some developers in-house, as we've seen also, for example, Maersk. They have their own in-house development people. And more of logistics will move to handling papers, to handling really software code. And that's why I see those companies using blockchain, even though in context that would not make sense for smaller companies.
Or not yet. Makes sense.
Not yet, yeah.
Because the added value is not provable, showable.
Yes.
That's very interesting. Philippe, Unisot is then also an example, a good example. They moved to blockchain for traceability about their salmon, which is a very awkward application for me, but they had good reasons. Can you tell something or share something about that? The reasons why they moved to blockchain?
Because, yeah, I can definitely share some insight on that. I think, as I said before, to create that one data layer. So instead of every single company having their own data silo and, yeah, reading and writing on their own data, they chose to create a single source of truth. So a single data layer where all these different players can add data, and so it's traceable that who added data when in the supply chain. So that creates just one truth of what happened with the product, and you can still grant people access to only certain parts of the data. So that's what is interesting, and why the blockchain is an interesting technology to implement there, because you can give the transporter, he doesn't need to know how much the fish costs, for example, if it's a very high grade of salmon. But he only needs to know what the weight is, what the package size is, to be able to transport it efficiently. So he only gets access to that part of the data. But then the sushi restaurant, they only need to know what the quality of the fish is, and when it was caught, and when it was slaughtered, to know when they can serve it to their clients. So you create this one data layer where you just grant access to everyone, and that's a perfect use case for blockchain.
Okay, well, thank you, Philippe, and I would like to thank Pedro, Michiel, Philip, you as well, and of course Geert for hosting together with me this webinar. There are no more questions from the audience, so we are also at the end of our time slot, just a bit exceeded. I hope that was not a problem, and I also like to thank the audience for attending this webinar and hope to hear from them soon. So thank you everybody for joining this webinar.
Thank you, Frederik.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.